So welcome to the webinar today. We are going to cover how you can run all the great features of Windows Server without the crippling licensing costs. My name is Thomas. I work in the solutions team here at Synology, and I previously worked as a desktop technician at Computer Center, so I've dealt with a few Windows servers before. So as an IT manager, your reputation is on the line and you can't afford things to go wrong. So we're going to cover sort of how you migrate everything to DSM, sort of Synology stuff, how to set up a file server, which acts as like a gateway to your Microsoft Cloud, get all your credentials handled with AD, Synology Directory Server, and sort of we'll use RSAT to sort of do some of that. And we'll talk also about security, so sort of DSM itself, but also how Synology sort of has your back. Now, I'm sure you're aware a lot of laptops and desktops are running on a Windows operating system, but 72% of servers also run on a Windows operating system, but there's only sort of one small problem with that, and that's the licensing costs. It's not cheap, for a small medium business. Every little cost saving helps. And there's also it's become even more complicated. So as costs are now per core, adding extra overhead, but sort of what we really need to know is what SMBs need their file server to do. So you can see here that Windows can offer you quite a lot, but Synology actually offers you more, or the same and more, right out of the box. The only thing we can't necessarily do is remote desktop, but that can be handled through sort of a Synology router and Synology's sort of SRM, which is the router manager. And you can see here that if we take a look at a trust radius comparison for Synology DSM and Windows File Server, Synology actually comes out on top with an 8.9 out of 10, whereas Windows File Server only gets the 8.5. And of course, Synology is Linux based, so you can get excited when there's an update, as you get more free stuff rather than sort of worrying about what the update might break or what it will cost you. But before we start, as I'm sure you're all aware, you have the opportunity to win a DS723 Plus today. It's our most powerful 2-bay ever, and if you stick around to the end, I will tell you how to enter. So the first thing we're going to cover today is how we can seamlessly migrate to Synology and the 3 steps involved in this. So we're going to look at what keeps IT admins awake at night. Well, inconsistent data is one of the biggest. It's not only frustrating for sort of an admin in this scenario, but users aren't going to be happy about it either, especially if their data is not available to them. Then you've got configurations, and I know for myself, I want to do it once, forget about it, and I have to keep sort of resetting things up and worrying about it in that sort of way. And then finally you sort of have the compatibility issues. You want everything sort of up and running, working effectively, and sort of the way we can do this is there's sort of 2 strategies. And the first is migrating to Synology and having it run natively. This is much cleaner and will probably provide you with better performance. But the second option, you can run a Windows server as a VM on a Synology box, but this of course doesn't get rid of your licensing costs, so we're going to go with a native DSM option for today. But we need to choose the right hardware, of course. There's a complete range, all the way from a 2-bay desktop system to a fully fledged sort of 24-bay all SSD flash station, but you can start smaller. So we'll use this 2-bay for example, and as data grows, we all know it grows fast, you can easily add an expansion on, and that will sort of cover your data needs there. Now we're going to talk about P&I. They provide custom PLC and SCADA software systems to the industry in sort of storage and distribution, processing chemical industries, and telecommunication data centers. They've been around for about 40 years and decided they had enough of their old Windows server, and they wanted to change this. So they decided they would go for a cloud system for email, as they didn't need the security of a private mail server like Synology Mail Plus, and they had the money to do so, so opted for external hosting, and then they decided to use Synology for their data storage, backups, and surveillance. So putting ourselves in the minds of P&I, how do we move our data across from Windows to Synology? Well, we recommend using fast copy. It's a free tool, and it also clones the ACL permissions. And if you're running AD, we can also move that across to Synology either by migrating it, as you can see here at the bottom. And the last thing we'll cover in this sort of set of demos will be the NTP settings. So that's making sure that everything's synchronized, as most of the common errors can be resolved by having a properly synchronized time server. To give you some context going into the demos, the top screen will be our sort of Windows server, and the bottom our Synology target. And just to sort of reiterate that, we mentioned the NTP settings is one of the things we'll go over, fast copy setup, and then sort of showing ACL permissions. So here we are on our Synology NAS. If we go into control panel and regional options, you can see there's lots of options available sort of for date format and time format. You can also pick your time zone, whichever one you would need. And you have the option to sort of set your time manually, or you can synchronize with an NTP server. In our example, we can use Google, and we'll click update now, and that will then synchronize our disk station with the Google time server. And there we go. So in our next demo, we're going to go through the ACL permissions, and this is sort of going through fast copy as well. So we have ourselves on our Windows machine here, and we're going to look at this information folder. That's going to be our source, so that's the one we're moving across, and there you can see we have our IT team folder on our NAS. We're going to tick the ACL permissions box because we want them to move across, and we're just going to look at what files are in there so we can make sure that data is all moved. So we have the 3 files in the general folder, and there's the files in the important folder. So if we also have a look at our general properties, you can see that there are 2 there. There is Thomas, which is myself, and then John Harrison, one of our northern resellers. He's an attendee today. We don't want him touching our important IT files, so we have decided to deny him access to those. So those are the permissions we want to copy across as well. So if we now click execute on fast copy, and we set that off, there we go, finished up, all nice and quickly. And now we're just going to make sure that our files have moved across. So if we go into IT team, our general folder, and you can see our 3 text documents there, and then the important folder, we can see that all our documents are there, including those 2 Excel files. So we're just going to check that our permissions have come across, and there you can see John Harrison is denied access to our important folder. And if we look at general, you can see that he will still have access to this folder. There you go, he has read permissions. So if we now sign in as John Harrison to prove these permissions have gone across, as you can see here, just proving that we are signed in as John Harrison, and we'll open up File Explorer, and we'll go to the map drive that I set up earlier. We open this up, and we have our information folder there, and we open up general, you can see all those 3 files, brilliant. And if we go back and try and look at the important files, you can see that he's been denied access. So that proves that the ACL permissions were transferred across as well. So we've shown there the NTP server, and sort of it's sort of making sure that's all synchronized, and then we've shown off fast copy, moving data across, making sure that it's all there, and then having the ACL permissions move with it. So now we're going to go back to PNI, and in the end they can easily run their key functions for their business on a fleet of 2 base Synology servers. They have their AD, DNS and VPN server backing up to their cloud on one side, and their backup server, file server and CCTV system on the other. Now we're looking at sort of what can be easily migrated. So the AD server, the DNS server, the backup server and file server can all easily be migrated across. Surveillance station, we've not put a green tick on it, but you could probably just run the sort of software or system that you're using currently, put it on a VM within the box, and slowly migrate sort of 5 cameras over every night until you're fully system set up on surveillance station. So it could get a green tick, but in this case it's not an easy one, or not necessarily easy and not straightforward. So we've left it off. But there's so many apps on offer, over 130 apps and services available on DSM, from active backup for business in the top left to sort of Synology directory server next door, which we'll cover more later on. We have virtual machine manager there in the middle, and even a web server at the bottom right, and 99% of these are license free. So we covered sort of our 3-step migration, making sure that all our files are there and the permissions are migrated with them. We're now going to be looking at building a powerful modern file server. So we're going to start by looking at a sort of simple and easy way to connect to your Synology server. This being Quick Connect, just making sure that you can sort of remotely access it nice and easy. So we're here on our Synology server, and we're going to go to Control Panel, External Access, and we're going to enable Quick Connect. So it's nice and easy right there in front of you, and we're going to name this one Spot Webinar. Now we're going to hit Apply, and this goes through Let's Encrypt, and that sort of is how it sets the domain up. And Let's Encrypt has been integrated with Synology since DSM 7, so it's been around for a little bit. But there you can go. We set up our Quick Connect ID with Spot Webinar. We're going to now open up an incognito browser and type in that sort of easy to remember link, quickconnect.to/spotwebinar, and you'll see that this takes us to our server and allows us to log in as usual. So there we go, nice and easy, logged in using our Quick Connect ID, and there it is. So now we're going to sort of look at Synology Drive and how that connects in with sort of our hybrid cloud. So we can look at that now. So we're here on our Windows PC, and we're going to open up our NAS and go to Package Center, and we're going to scroll down just a little bit and click on Cloud Sync. That's already installed for us, so we're just going to grab it from the Application Center, and you can see that we've set up Microsoft OneDrive to sync up already, and I've set the polling period to 30 seconds for the demo. It's set to 600 as standard, which is probably going to be more than enough for most businesses, but for the demo's sake I'll put it to 30 seconds. And I've also created this Drive NAS Cloud folder as a spot for us to sort of move our files into and see it synchronize. So this is Synology Drive set up on our Windows PC, that folder I just specified, and here's the documents that we need to move across. These are 2 sort of posters that I created for my hockey team and our fixtures list. So this is now being synced up with the NAS through Drive into that folder, as we can see. And then if we double check on OneDrive, you can see that the files have gone into here as well. But we've had some sort of notification that our game against Telford has changed from 10 o'clock to 7 o'clock. So we're going to make those changes in OneDrive, so this is being made in the cloud and it's saved there. So we can see if we go back to OneDrive and we refresh, that fixtures list has been changed a few seconds ago, whereas the other documents were put in it about a minute ago now. And we'll go back to our disk station, and you can see that we're now just waiting for that polling, that 30 seconds to come in. And there we go. You can see that Cloud Sync has synced up. It's brought in our new fixtures list file, and we're going to minimize. And it's going to sync down with Drive, so if we refresh this quickly just to make sure, and then double click and open, you'll be able to see that our file has been changed from 10 o'clock to 7 o'clock. So that's taking the file from here on our Drive folder into the NAS, onto OneDrive, back to our NAS, and then back down onto our local PC. So that shows that we can easily sync files with the NAS, have them pushed to the cloud, edit them in the cloud, and have these changes pushed back down to the NAS and onto our PC with real ease. But we're now going to look at getting Synology Directory Server up and running in under 10 minutes. I think it's actually going to be even less than sort of 7. But just so you're aware, Synology Directory Server is actually Synology Active Directory for any of you that are wondering. The package was renamed just to not cause sort of confusion, and we're also going to utilize RSAT tools, so it kind of minimizes that learning curve. So once again, we're here on our NAS, and we're going to go to Package Center, and we're going to scroll down to install Synology Directory Server. In our case, we have already installed it, but before we do anything else, we want to go to Control Panel and make sure that we have a static IP set. So we're now going to go back to our applications, and you can see that DNS Server has also been installed here, and we're going to open up Synology Directory Server. So you've got the option to create a domain. You can add a domain controller to an existing domain. You can also create add a read-only domain controller, or what we covered earlier, migrating from a Windows Server domain. But for us, we're just going to go with create a domain. So if we select this, we need to now name our domain. In this case, we're calling it spot.local. Our work group will be spot, and then we're just going to set here a password for the administrator account. And you can see that the check done by the Synology Directory Server is rather quick, and then we're going to create our domain. And it's all done there, and it's just giving us a few notifications about what's changed. And we're going to go to users, and then we're going to add a new user, and we're going to call this Thomas. So we're creating an account for myself. We're going to put in an email address, and then we're going to create a password. I'm going to untick force this account to change password at next login, just for ease of access, but we'd recommend to keep this checked, of course. And I'm just going to add myself to the domain admins group so that I have access to use the RSAT tools. So we're going to click done here, and that's going to create this user, and we'll see it populate in our users group. There we go. So the next thing we need to do is add our Windows PC to this domain. So if we go to About Your PC and we scroll down, you will see an option to rename this PC in brackets Advanced, and we're just going to put this to the side quickly. Similarly to earlier, we want to make sure that we have an IP address set, but this time around we want to make sure it's the DNS server. So we'll go into Properties and find the DNS, and I've already set this to our NAS, so that's in place, ready for it to connect up. So we're going to close these windows down, and we're going to go back to our system properties, and we're going to go to change and then domain. So we're going to add it to a domain, the one we just set up, which is spot.local, and we're going to click OK. And of course we need to authenticate, so we're going to use the account we just created. And there we go, we're going to click OK, so we're just waiting to join the domain now. And there we have it, we've just joined spot.local, and it's going to ask us to restart, so we're going to do that now. So we've restarted our machine and logged in with the Thomas account. As you can see here, we're under the spot domain now. And now we're going to look at our group policy settings. So if we go into our tree and we go to our domain and open up spot.local, and I created two user groups here, attendees and hosts, and I am down as a host, so I'm going to create a GPO within the hosts group, and we're going to use it to set a specific wallpaper. So we're going to name this wallpaper and wait for that to be created. So there we go, our group policy has been created. If we expand hosts and we right click on this and edit this, and we dive into the user configuration, we go into policies, we go into admin templates and desktop, and then in desktop again we will find desktop wallpaper. We're going to double click this and we're going to enable it, and now we're going to add our wallpaper name. Now this is the location of our file, so we know it's on our NAS, we're going to put in that address, but I can't remember exactly where it is. So if we go to our NAS quickly and we open up File Station, we're looking for system files, and there's our Windows wallpaper. If we go to Properties, and we can grab that location there, we don't need the volume, we just need the folder after it. So it'll be system files and then Windows wallpaper. We're going to paste that in, and we just need to change that / because the Linux and Windows talk in different directions. So that's all set up there, and we're just going to change the wallpaper style to fit, so we want to make sure it fits in that window, and click apply. And that's all done, so we're going to click OK there, and we're going to close down these windows, and we're going to run a GP update. So this will then enforce that policy that we've just set up. There we go, policy has been applied, and we're going to restart, and as you can see we've now got that wallpaper applied. So just to prove that it's not something I've just set, we're going to go to personalize, and you can see that some of these settings are hidden or managed by your organization. So we can see that the group policy is applied and made that change happen. So there you have it, a fully set up domain using fully integrated RSAT tools to create, modify and apply GPO. You get to use the same tools you used to, so there's no learning curve, but everything is running on Synology now. But we just need to know the factors for speccing a system. So here you can see we have a range of options from a 2-bay NAS all the way up to a 24-bay flash station, all with 8 terabytes of storage, and you've got the options for small medium business, and it can run all of the applications we've been talking about so far. So we're now going to look at some stats for the right file server. So we're talking here, when we look at drive users, this is the amount syncing at a single time. So the 2-bay model here can take 350 users all syncing at the same time, and the flash station can take 2000. And then drive files are going to be the most important thing. Obviously you need to make sure you have enough storage for all of your data, but it's the number of files that matters the most. And then we're going to look at choosing the right directory server. So the objects here are sort of all of your operational units, groups, users and devices, and by using RSAT you're able to get sort of 10 times the amount of objects. Then we can look at the connections. This is concurrent connections, so 100 at a time should be sufficient for a good number of businesses, but if you need 2000 you can obviously go all the way up to the flash station. But we have some frequent questions we're asked about configurations. Is a more powerful CPU going to give more users and objects? Is an SSD cache needed? Are SSDs needed? And is more memory needed to improve performance? Well, the answer is yes. In terms of drive, a more powerful CPU will give you more objects and users. A cache is always going to be answered yes when it comes to a file server or drive, because it will cache your locally used files. But if it's going to be a large amount, we'd probably recommend going with SSDs. We have a case study with a company called Eatery. They've got about 4,000 users. They use 2 flash stations in HA to sort of fit all their user needs. And is more memory needed to improve performance? Yes. If you've got multiple services running, obviously more memory will be good. It works the same way as a computer would. Now when we're talking about directory server, a more powerful CPU won't make a difference. SSDs won't make a difference, but more memory will. I think you can double your concurrent connections if you upgrade the RAM. For example, on the 2-bay, from the sort of what it is, you add an extra 2 gig, I think it gives you an extra 100 users. But there are also some hybrid cloud alternatives. These may come in handy if you have a lot of workers sort of remotely, allowing them to authenticate to the cloud rather than coming back to your local server via VPN. You have Azure sort of Active Directory, makes it expensive and requires use of Teams and a special Azure ID license. And you have Synology C2 Identity, which is sort of more ideal for your small medium businesses as you get up to 10 free accounts. But let's have a look at the comparison between the two. As you can see, C2 Identity doesn't have all the features that Azure has, but it does provide a majority of businesses with everything they could need. So we've covered off how to spec a modern file server and what you need to look at. But now we're going to talk about Synology's commitment to security and how it's not just important to have a good product, but be able to trust the company behind that product as well. There's a wider range of apps and services that will allow you to back up your data. You can use Active Backup for Business, which we mentioned earlier, for your Windows PCs and any VMs. There's also cloud backup options for Google and Microsoft 365. There's many options for backing up your NAS itself, and even the option to back up to tape through sort of Archiveware P5 there at the bottom left, if that suits your needs. So we have the software to keep things safe, but is Synology an organization you can trust? Well, in 2017 we had the December cry, sort of created a massive vulnerability and it affected many workplaces. If you're using Synology back then, I'm sure you would have seen there was a fix within one day. Now if we compare this with some big companies, it took IBM 6 days to turn around a fix, and Cisco a scary 45 days before they had a solution to the problem. Now the way that Synology does this is through their dedicated security team, PISA. It's the Synology Product Security Response Team. It's a task force in place to investigate, report and provide a solution, and as you can see, the aim is to have the event handled in just over 24 hours. So you can easily see that security is a priority, and to drive this home we have a bounty program where hackers are rewarded up to sort of $20,000 for any help that they can provide. We also have First Member. This is a forum for industry leaders to share knowledge around security, and we are the first NAS brand to be recognized by MITRE, meaning we can assign our own vulnerabilities to the products. Only companies that are serious about security have that clearance. So we've covered quite a lot today. We looked at migration and how you can move your data and even ACL permissions across. We looked at the modern business file server and how going hybrid is the future. No business is purely private or cloud-based. And we covered off our commitment to security and the various teams and programs in place to cover this. So in January we updated our 2-bay Plus series to the DS723 Plus. It now has a massive performance boost with up to 471 megabytes sort of per second, and it's now got 10 gig optional connectivity with a whopping 90 terabytes of storage. Obviously this is with an expansion, and there are now 2 onboard NVMEs that have previously been used for caching previously, but you can now also utilize them as an ultra fast storage pool. And it's not just great performance but great service. There's a 3-year warranty as standard, but you have the option to align to 5 years with your other enterprise kit with the extended warranty plus.